Hello, and welcome to the OKM cast. I'm your host, Jesse Hodsman, and this is a search for sanity in an insane world. Join us as we dig deep into the nature of our experience and ask some provocative questions about meaning, purpose, and path in relation to this crazy thing we all call life. Welcome to episode 1 of the OKM cast, an interview with Alan Clements. Voice, integrity, and the will to act. Alan is an accomplished public speaker, a 6-time published author whose titles include Burma, the Next Killing Fields, Instinct for Freedom, The Voice of Hope, Burma's Voices of Freedom, A Future to Believe in, and Wisdom for the World, The Requisites of Reconciliation. Make sure to check out Alan's website at worlddharma.com, where you can find access to any of these wonderful reads, and to support Alan on Patreon as a creator at patreon.com/Alan Clements. Alan has been interviewed by BBC, New York Times, Newsweek, USA Today, the list goes on. And so even though Alan's a friend and mentor of mine, I was definitely a little bit nervous. No lies. But the show must go on, and fortunately, Alan is a great speaker. So yes, let's get to it. Please enjoy. This is my first podcast, so thanks for joining me, Alan. I was going to remember that there's listeners. It's a dynamic that I'm not used to be like guiding, hosting, sort of.
Cool,
it's wild, yeah.
Well, we've known each other a long time. So
totally,
just two guys talking.
Totally. And I mean, in light of that sort of sentiment of transcending fear, I actually wanted to ask you if you'd recount, because it's one of my favorite stories, your Spiritually Incorrect, the dawn of it, in that theater in Vancouver.
Oh, yeah.
Just because, I mean, there's so many people in the world who, want to put their neck out there, and to me it's always been a very inspiring.
Yeah, what you're referring to back in 2003 here in Vancouver, East Van Cultural Center. I'd done a book, Instinct for Freedom. I'd been a former Buddhist monk. I'd been teaching retreats worldwide. And there was just something about being in the role of a spiritual teacher that just wasn't fitting for me. And so I had this urge to explore a new vocation, which I felt was the spoken word artist, which was born from Burma, where I'd been a monk. And I'd been involved there in their activist movement, where they combine poetry and theater and storytelling into a subversive challenge to authority and hidden and overt structures of indoctrination. It's subversive. Spiritual teachers can't really be subversive. You can be smart and sincere, but being subversive and comedic and satirical, you don't really do that as a spiritual teacher, or certainly a meditation teacher.
Well, you can be
calm and still, that kind of thing. Anyway, to cut to the chase, the one inspiration I had was in Burma, this gentleman named U Pandita, which was Burma's, for lack of better comparisons, their Jim Carrey or Robin Williams, maybe even closer to Saul Williams. But he was talented. He was the man who confronted injustice. I had met him, and he had gone to prison, Jesse, for 6 years, pounding rock with leg irons and arm irons for confronting Burma's dictatorship for 90 minutes. And it was radically inspiring to see and hear him perform after he had been released, when he came to Aung San Suu Kyi's house and said that I've just been released, and for 6 long years, I've been pounding rock, waiting for this moment to perform. Now, I think it's worthy to say this. So many of us spiritual people live and breathe in this moment now. The now is like the wacky key of the galaxy. Mm-hmm. Everyone wants to return to this moment now. Now, this guy snapped me out of the coma, if you will, of this belief that the now is the only place to occupy. Because I've been like an ardent meditator, and here he's telling the audience, for 6 long years I've been waiting to get the fuck out of myself. I'm tolerating this moment to get in front of you. And I thought, I read Mandela's book, and he said something similar. For 25 years, every day of my incarceration, I thought of freedom. So there's something about the future there that I go, wow, you can break out of the coma of your ordinary dogma. It was like the first crack, if you will. The now was so special to me. And then he's talking about ethical, spiritual courage. I've been waiting for 6 years to tell you, to share with you what I want to do. And that was like really beautiful for me to see someone playing such high stakes with their voice, with their energy, again, getting closer and closer. He performed for 30, 40, 60, 80, 90 minutes. And he knew that he would go back to prison. He was rearrested, 7 more years of leg irons and arm irons, pounding rock for a 90-minute gig. And here I'm crowing about the retreat, how many people are coming. These people are playing super high stakes. So I'm here in Vancouver, 2003. What can I do with my life that really means something? I thought of U Parlay. So I said, where would I like to perform if I were U Parlay? And I went down to the East Van Cultural Center. I'd been there before. And I had no idea what to anticipate, but they let me in, and there was, the stage, and people were doing what they were doing. They took a lunch break. And there I was, Jesse, in this stage with maybe 500 empty seats, and they left the mic on, and I felt completely like a 4-year-old there. I didn't know what to do. I was used to meditation centers and Masonic lodges and all churches, but not a theater. And people are dressed up and drinking wine. They're all stoned. They're not doing ayahuasca. They're attentive to you, doing what you want to do any way that you want to do it on the stage of reality. No performance needed. You can be yourself. That was what I was hearing. That's what I remember U Parlay doing. Be yourself. Be beyond authentic. What is you? Don't just hide behind authenticity. That's what my thought was. Anyway, I thought about it and said, Jesus Christ, I cannot do U Parlay. I wouldn't have a clue what to say and do. I walked out with my kind of tail beneath my legs, and the owner, the manager, said, how would you like it? And I said, it was fantastic. And I kind of wanted to just skedoodle out of there. And he asked me, what do you do? And I was confronted with the fear and the shame, the doubt, I can't tell him. You can hear me right now choking. This is 16 years later, still choking. Alan, get with it. You're near death. And I said, well, I'm a spoken word artist. And it's a complete lie, Jesse. It was made it up on the line. Because I did, I talked for a living, I did meditation, did guided meditations.
Like, technically I'm a spoken, I just blurted it out.
So I'm a spoken word artist, and he said, what do you do? And I went, oh my God, Alan, you've lied, you've fucked up. And I thought, because I was a fan of Bill Maher's Politically Incorrect, his TV show, I said immediately, I do spiritually incorrect, like proudly.
Yeah.
Another lie.
Yeah.
And he said, he kind of stopped in that moment of like kind of transcendent, oh wow, this is super cool. And are you going to perform? When are you going to perform? And I went, it's in process. And then he made the gesture, do you want to perform here? He was like just reading my soul or something, my subconscious, People talk about synchronicity. I didn't even believe in it at the time. But he was kind of coaxing me out of my trauma, my fear, my orthodoxy. And I said, I would really, that'd be rocking, man. That's totally cool. And I was trembling inside, keeping this double face of composure with these lies and deeply inside being vulnerable. He says, come on in the office and we'll get you a date. So I'm lying my way to the throne. I walk into his office. I'm praying nothing's available. And he said, what night do you want? And I said, a Saturday night, thinking that there'd be none available. Because it's a very popular theater, as you know, you've probably been there. Yeah. So he's going September, October, November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June, July. I'm going a year out, still nothing. Anyway, 18 months out, there's a Saturday night, and he asked, do you want it? And I said, I'll take it.
18 months, I can do 18 months.
18 months. And I walked out of there thinking that, wow, what an incredibly beautiful mistake I made. But I forgot it. And 3 months prior to that particular date, I started to sweat it, and I realized, that was one of the best, most calculated lies of my life. And so anyway, that was my first show, September 19th, 2000 and something, 3, 4, or 5. And 270 shows later, all of them different, because I lived in the theory that if I'm going to do theater, I don't want to perform and do things that are memorized or rote.
Yeah, so that's like what I'm very interested in too. It's sort of this obsession with being ready. Everyone, to be ready. Yeah. You spoke to it at the Spiritually Incorrect the other day.
Yeah, and people expect that you want to entertain them out of their particular malaise or their fears or their worries. I just want to be real with you. I don't want to have a set script when I'm making love or kissing or talking or holding hands. There's no two that will do love in the same way. I want to be free to be in the same way.
Yeah.
I don't want to be an entertainer. I want to be a liberated individual. So I chose to be spontaneous, unscripted, and spontaneous in my show called Spiritually Incorrect.
Super cool. Yeah, it's always been like a major inspiration. There's a lot of people in the world now who are, especially with the narcissistic lens that is social media and our obsessions of self-reflection, collective self-reflection, and there's a lot of people who want to like put their neck out there, whether it's to learn a new thing or learn a new art, or especially in the world of performance, you know. It's just such a crazy thing to be so scripted, you know. The amount of times I've like recorded, re-recorded that introduction and or other introductions to myself, and I'm like, nah, it's just, I'll look at both of them and they'll be like identical, and I'm like, nah, I just don't like that one. There's like the nuance of narcissism in the world today is quite large, and for people trying to like get over that story's always, to me, just been quite...
Well, it's a challenge when there's so much cultural dissonance reflected back at you on what beauty looks like, what intimacy looks like, what sex looks like, what success looks like, what being a successful yoga teacher looks like, what does it mean to be in the asana of, you know, culturally scripted success. And to drop as much as you can the referencing to the self-imposed slavery to cultural norms is a challenging thing, because you run the risk of upsetting the status quo of how people see you and how you see yourself. And so people ask about meditation, they ask about theater, they ask about intimacy. I think the most intimate expression of who you can be is to own your own uniqueness. And that's a very challenging thing. Like, I do yoga every day. I've been doing it for 40 years. And there's so many people that do yoga based upon form, and they use the word authenticate the asana. But you can see that they're really more concerned with doing the asana right rather than authenticating. So the best form of yoga has to apply also to the paraplegic. You know, it's not a form, it's not a calisthenic, it's not a contortionist movement. It's a state of consciousness. And so the Dharma, meditation, theater, your voice, what is your voice, your intimacy, your sexuality? It's a state of consciousness. Authenticate you in your integrity. So authenticity to me has to be informed by integrity, by dignity, by conscience, by respect, by esteem, and not by forms, not by amounts, not by how many followers, not by how much applause, not by how many numbers in your workshop, in your retreat, in your teacher training. To come back to being ordinary.
When you say, like, for the modern individual, with such a like high complexity of gymnastic like dimensions to jump through, like whether it is how many followers you have, or the food you're cooking, or how well you take care of your friend, or your career, or your success, or all these like sort of like dimensions of navigation that we shouldn't maybe hold on to them as obstacles, but nonetheless have to navigate them. And in this modern world is like quite complex for the individual, and like those places of, say, personal image referencing, you know, you need to be your own unique self, but when you compare yourself to that yoga teacher, that podcaster, that whatever, they're sort of dimensions of polish. The standards are quite high in this modern world, and so I feel that often the like average individual feels repressed in their ability to be unique, for lack of polish, and then they have to jump through so many hoops. I guess one of my questions for you was also in regards to that, and maintaining that sort of authenticity, but where does like that motivation to act and drive to continually show up with the sort of enormity of complexity we're faced with, whether it's the complexity of your individual passage in consciousness and personal life, or that in regards to our climate calamity in the world, that motivation to act beyond, to put your neck out there, or however, like, how do you think about that, or the drive, you know, the drive to persist with face, like, because we're on this edge of like throwing in the towel or not, like a lot of people are dealing with that sentiment on the daily, I think.
Well, I'm old-fashioned in some ways, that the spiritual life, call it the Dharma life, what do I mean by that? Is the quality of your emotional being, your fidelity to transformational insight, wisdom in yourself and whom you're with. And how well can you, or how well can I bring my Dharma to bear upon the moment? So I'm really pointing to the emotional, existential, psychological excellence, the quest for excellence in intimacy. And then there's the issue of what I do with my mind and my body and my time in form, which you just can't be a monk or a nun in the world unless you really want to be. But at the same time, we're entities that require physical contact, require food, we require shelter, we require clothing, we require the need to show up with our family and our friends, to give, to receive, to learn. And so the intelligences that I'm speaking to also require a Dharma wisdom. And so inner excellence must be coupled with behavioral excellence. And then you have the vocation, what I would call being human. That's the talents to me of what I aspire and admire most in people, is how well you embody being human. And the aesthetics of that, the integrity of that. If you and I are friends, would I have an expectation of you to be honest? Yes. Would I allow you to be frail in your honesty? Yes. Would I love you being forgiving of my shortcomings? Yes. So to have on your emotional, psychological, existential Dharma palette some degree of states of mind that you aspire to evolve, and let those colors, those energies, those dharmas be what defines who you are. That's the stage, is the Dharma stage, and how well do you kind of perform or feel into these qualities of you could, for lack of better terms, it's kind of inner athleticism in a way. Mm-hmm. Inner yoga.
Yeah, I guess sort of the navigation of the inner ecosystem.
And to know that, but to know, you and I are speaking English, we are choosing words appropriately, and we're assuming that we know each other's conversation because we've trained in definition, etymology, syntax, grammar. But how well do you know the definitions of your spiritual life, your psychological life? How well do you use language precisely that you would a musical note, or an asana move, or a word, or a pause, or a choice of word, or a definition, or a color, or whatever it is. Music is very precise. The Dharma is very precise. Emotions are very precise. I will respect you based upon your regard for the intelligences and the precisions and the excellences of your emotional, psychological, spiritual choices. And so to me, that's the authentication of being human. Isn't just a state, it's a degree of respect for intelligence. And okay, what are your intelligences? What defines you as a man, Alan? Dignity is hugely important. Well, you know, I've been in Burma, you've been to Burma. Mm-hmm. I've had the good fortune of meeting many former political prisoners. And when I've asked them, what is your Dharma? What is your meditation? What is your art when you're a prisoner, when you're behind bars? They often say, we learned what it meant to live in dignity. It's a very foreign concept to most of us. What does it mean, I asked? Well, it means the way you sit is in self-respect. Very few people have the talent to be able to be embodied in a respectful gesture to themselves, much less with someone else. Mm-hmm. So how do you embody self-respect? You have to have a great love of your integrity, your generosity, your caring. Caring is huge for me. Mm-hmm. So to come back to a simple thing, how well do you care for shared space is a question I ask myself with people. Mm-hmm. How well do you care for what you and I are doing in this communion together? And how well do you bring your artistry, your Dharma, your emotions, your music, your art, your intimacy? How well do you listen? How well do you talk? How well do you occupy your senses? Call that Dharma aestheticism. Mm-hmm. That to me is the music of today. That's the yoga of today. That's the meditation of today. That's taking meditation and yoga off the cushion, off the mat, out of the monastery, down from the mountain, and we are alive in this ambient world as humans. What will we do with the preciousness of this full breath? Mm-hmm. And those who get that secret message, you want to fall in love with them, because you do fall in love with them. You want to marry them. You want to play with them. You want to create art with them. You want to surf with them. You want to hold their hand. My mom recently died. Your dad, I think, recently died as well. Well, my mom, before she died, my dad died too. She grabbed my hands. You've seen this, and I've said it before many times. I'm proud to say it. She said, Alan, these hands can't touch anymore. They're all gnarled at 96. You have good hands. Don't just touch someone. Tell them what you love. Don't tell them what you love. Tell them what you love about them. No, don't tell them what you love about them. Show them love about what you love about them. Manifest was her message. You stay at home, you walk behind a computer, go out into the sun, meet people, look at their eyes. Be in relationship with the message. And how well do you show up there is the question that we all need to ask ourselves. That's the question that really inspires me today, because there's so much coming down the pike.
Mm-hmm.
The young girl in Sweden, Greta Thunberg, she's screaming out as a climate activist, hey, the house is on fire. You know, it may not work out in the way that you think it is. It is a crisis. Don't think of hope, think of action.
Mm-hmm.
She said, bring that voice of concern into every conversation. No conversation is complete today. Many people in the existential or in the extinction rebellion movement are saying, without talking about our collusion, our enabling, our complicity with the denigration of the environment and the likelihood of extinction.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to bring in these complexities. Okay, what does that mean to the intimacies that you and I are sharing right now? What does that mean to include that in our intellectual, emotional, psychological lexicon today?
Mm-hmm.
What are we doing either to participate in the furthering of the future or the denigration of life on the planet?
Mm-hmm.
These are colossal questions, and where do I go with them, to cut right to the chase? The quality of caring, to have the courage to listen and to ask extremely complex questions. And I'll end with this.
Mm-hmm.
It's one thing for you and I to be present with each other. Namaste.
Mm-hmm.
But it's another thing altogether for you and I to be present with people who are not in this room with us. Another level of namaste.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we could not be who we are without the food, the shelter, the clothing.
Family, friends, gifts, and gratitude.
I mean, the dimensionality of what's required to keep this moment active. Then our role in caring is the generation into the future, the 4-year-old, the 2-year-old, the woman today who's carrying a new baby, the bird who's pregnant, the whales, the bird, I mean, the ecosystem of life, and then the generations out. How well do we care for those people that we don't know is a crucial question today.
Mm-hmm. That's probably one of the biggest ones, yeah. I mean, there's, I think, a bit sort of like that, I want to call it self-similar relationship, where how you value the relationships, whether they're lovers, family, friends, or those people dear and close to you, which is a very important first level. And then, like in the loss of like a family member or something, when they're gone, you know, and you don't know what you got till it's gone. And right now we're also a bit, you could say, how that intimate relationship as proximal to you or as close to you as you can manage translates into this sort of near and term relationship potentially with Mother Earth or their big girlfriend basically. And people are not maybe seeing the gravity of the situation, and it's an analogy, right? So, you know, when a relationship is over with a loved one or somebody like that's not quite the same as the relationship with Mother Earth for humanity. So it is an analogy, but we're near end term right now. There's this weird, you know, hope isn't going to fix that conversation for the world. Action needs to happen, and see all these kids standing up, and how that translation from the intimacy and nuance and specificity of those very difficult questions about how do I relate to you, but how do my daily choices of collusion or denigration, consciously, unconsciously, and where we, how much they have such a larger effect. Like we can't all go hide on a mountain right now and meditate our way through the next 15 years. We're just in the world has changed. And so for that modern individual, it's a very complex, just like massive questions really. It's like
hugely complex time. And I have a 12-year-old daughter who's taking off her 7th grade next year to travel the world with her mom. I hope she comes to Bali to be with me and to Burma and maybe Australia. But more to the point is there's a lot of existential anxiety that's unrecognized. We were both in Bali recently and we spent some time together, but I was up in Ubud, you were down in the coast most of the time. I had the blessing to do many public groups and met many, many hundreds of people. Mm-hmm. And I was surprised at how many people talked about complexities and issues in their lives, and good things too, but unrecognized existential anxiety. And when I got to see them more privately, when I had dinner or a glass of tea with them, or even some wine sometimes, when they confided in me, I don't know why I feel so uneasy. Mm. And, you know, and we'd talk about climate issues and the possibility of extinction. We talked about mortality. And so few people really want to embrace the fragile sacredness of being alive.
Mm-hmm.
You know, as a young man, when I was 17, I was turned on to the Buddhist teaching, and you know as well as I do, the first noble truth of the Four Truths is one of, when you're born, inevitably it's met with old age, and more to the point, it could be that you die young.
Mm-hmm.
That means that every breath is graded intimately across the landscape of it may not occur again.
Mm-hmm.
And when that facade of continuity cracks, you're in this existential open zone where it's very liberating and it's also very terrifying. That's what Dostoevsky said. The beauty is mysterious as well as terrible. And God and the devil are fighting there. Good and bad are fighting there, right in the human heart.
Mm-hmm.
And so how well do you occupy the convulsions, the confluence of your duality? That's a very important question for all of us. How well do you take responsibility for what you think and feel as sourced from within you? Self-responsibility. And so no matter what we think of as terms of the future, the quality of engagement. I've seen people walk right into the firing line. I've seen people risk their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the quality of conscience, despite the outcome, that gives them the credibility and the sanctity and the security that I lived well. And despite the likelihood of catastrophic economic and environmental catastrophe, which many climate scientists and many informed people are telling us, there's 8 to 9 to 11 years before, there may not be a chance to reverse this. And even then, it may not be reversible. Well, what does that do to you and me and other people in the world listening to us?
Well, there's the one side where you're defeated kind of feeling on the one perspective. Has me up late watching crap TV and eating pizza, again. And then the other side of pure motivation, the 100 best things to happen to global human rights, environmentalism, the empowerment of women, children, and on and on. And you look at the positive sides of things and you become very inspired despite the obstacles in the way. But then as soon as it teeters to defeat, it's really hard to why bother? And there's a lot of people in the world right now that, for lack of the education or perspective and vision, and then just for meeting a lot of people in that existential angst, who, whether it's recognized or unrecognized, are kind of fuck it. They just don't really know where to turn, or have the tools or access to starting some activist-based vision to contribute to the potential success of our dilemma, but it's a flip-flop for a lot of people, and a lot of people in the world, whether educated or non-educated, are sort of lacking sometimes the motivation, at the kind of specific end of activist-based change-making groups of the world. A lot of very motivated people, and then you just got this whole swath on both sides, and I was just trying to find a way to in my conversations normally with people, just push towards that motivation so that regardless of success, the life well lived and sentiment,
There's such a demand. I'm just thinking, listening to you, may or may not be connected, but there's such a demand, known and unknown, to participate in the capitalist machinery that we're embedded. Everything is not just costly, it's ticking away at a rapid pace, whether it be the Wi-Fi, the internet, the electricity, the rent. Everything is connected to this apparatus of capitalist corporate, I would call it what many people have called a kind of homicidal economy.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the very issue that we're not recognizing, that we're embedded in, that is the crystal meth, so to speak, of our existence, that we're in denial of, is that we're embedded in a homicidal behavioral economy that we're participants in. Everyone has their foot pedal connected to their body, and their body is connected to the foot pedal of denial. Mm-hmm. Everyone is using fossil fuels. It's happened to be, as many know, poisonous to our future.
Yeah.
And so the question becomes, how am I participating in murder?
Mm-hmm.
It's a very, not a necessarily very inviting concept.
Yeah.
But young girls are telling us at 16 years old, and she's calling on all of her schoolmates worldwide to boycott Friday. What does that say to older generations?
Oh, totally. Well, and there's, I think it's just the push and pull right now where you have all the solutions in place, the Internet of Things connecting up the power grid to the transportation grid to the telecommunications grid and the redistribution of power and the cost of solar going so low that the future and its solutions to kind of evade our problems right now, it's quite available, but the like stranded assets of existing oil and gas infrastructure and the infrastructure of power, transport, and telecommunication as it stands right now, those stranded assets, just from a sort of corporate, as a result of the structure of corporations, are just holding, they're getting as much juice as they can out of that lemon as long as they're capable to, not because it's a they thing or there's a particular individual's responsible. They'll just fire the next CEO, fire the next CEO. The corporation itself is like a structural impasse to us getting to those more economically viable solutions. But if there's no push or pull, if kids don't skip out on Fridays, they're going to keep squeezing the juice out of that lemon until maybe we miss the boat, right? And that's the push-pull right now with the kids, I think, is
5 previous extinctions. I just came from Burma last month. I was taken out by some people whom were connected to the education ministry, to an area of 700,000 people, some of the poorest areas of Rangoon.
Yeah. So sorry, you're like, because you were the course in Myanmar stuff got nixed, you're saying you got pushed for that reason, or?
Me.
Yeah, no, you were just saying recently.
I was just there last week.
Okay.
That was another time.
Okay, sorry.
I went back. And I wanted to see what democracy looked like in recent times there. And I was taken on a guided tour for the day to see these people living under tarpaulin and palm leaf during the monsoon with open sewage over many square miles, where many hundreds of children didn't know when they were born, didn't know how old they were, never had gone to school, don't know the alphabet, don't know particularly how to write, are taken care of by 6 and 8-year-olds while their parents, if they have them, take buses for an hour and a half each way into Rangoon to do what? To work in garment factories, if they're lucky, to make clothing for the West, and to build 5-star hotels and condominiums for the fat cats around the world. And I learned the concept, which was done by the author William Canton, ghost slaves. And I realized, as much as I am awake, I'm in such radical denial of how many people are living like livestock to keep this lifestyle going, who are talking about solutions and doing nothing about it, as if our lifestyle is maintained by credible, well-paid people, and it's not. On average, there's 80 slaves, 80 ghost slaves for every person in the West to keep their lifestyle intact.
Oh, geez.
And you go to the city of Rangoon where they live, and the gridlock, 20 hours a day, and the exhaustion, the pollution is almost unbearable. You see at least 100 20 to 30 story buildings going up simultaneously by Hong Kong, Singaporean, and Chinese, Vietnamese franchises. My point is that there's a lot of denial going on about the white West. There's a lot of lying going on about what needs to be done to fix the problem of the white West denial about what's going on. And this is where you and I, or people who are listening, who are kind of breaking the coma of complicity and slavery and going like, oh wait, I want to break out. One kind mind. Okay, what does that mean to be an activist at the edge today? I want to hold solidarity with Greta and many millions of other people around the world. What do I do? What needs to be done? Do I need to be authentic? Do I need to do a teacher training? Should I go to Bali and do an ecstatic dance? Should I do ayahuasca?
Yeah.
I mean, what are some solutions? And I'd like to, let's explore this. What can you do?
Yeah.
Rather than just improve on yourself. Now, to cut right to the chase, I think there's 2 things that I would consider, which I'm doing, which is show up where you are in the highest quality in respect to your emotional, psychological, spiritual life. Treasure your friends as if they're gods and goddesses, because they are. You can't be alive without them. Invest everything you've got in your family, your friends, your children, and do all that you can to evolve your Dharma, your yoga, your meditation. Open up the fidelity, the frequencies, the circuitries, the frequencies of what it is to be alive. To listen and to feel and to play out of the box. What could I do this week to manifest something that concerns itself with the future of life? At the same time keeps alive the promise of me being in fulfillment to the integrity of how I define myself as a human. Those two things, self and other. What will you do? But crack the coma. And I cannot encourage people enough. This is why meditation is so important. It'll interrupt the habit, the neurotic momentum of me doing me on the terms of me. It'll crack your narcissism. It'll crack your pride. It'll crack your egoism. Come to Burma. Come to our retreats. Come to a retreat. If you need help, I'll help you. But do something to pause and to feel. We don't need an answer right now as much as we need to take our foot off the foot pedal of denial and momentum and fear. The need to pay the rent, the need to keep my image up, the need to fill up my teacher training, the hustle to more Instagram followers. There's not enough this week. I've got to respond more and more to Zuckerberg's need. I've got to respond more and more to Zuckerberg's need. Come down off the crystal meth of your denial. Feel.
Is there like a pretty quick to convolute or confuse the idea of need and want a lot, maybe? Or like you might want to have more Instagram followers, you might want to keep your image up, but food, shelter, friends, family, those like most intimate, basic things we do need, and like sort of discerning those two realities, slowing down enough to...
This is where I would recommend entheogens, with a really a trans-shamanistic guide, someone who's adept in ego dissolving, pride interruption, narcissism challenge, where you, oh my God, what I think I want is not at all what will serve me.
Yeah.
It's a hollow game driven by a cultural imperative called the politics of corporation. I've drank the Kool-Aid of belonging to the club of lying and corporate greed called my yoga, my meditation, my Canggu, my breasts, my filler, my fucking Botox, my pretense, my badass. There's a real subtle difference between being a badass and a dumbass. I've said that repeatedly. And being an egomaniac with 175,000 followers because you're an acro yoga teacher, fuck you. You should pride yourself on coming down off followers, coming down off the corporate greed machine, and authenticate. It's not about money. It's not about accumulating, not about success anymore, because no amount of money can you save and have a legacy of success that will outsmart catastrophic climate chaos and near-term extinction. Get it, Alan? We're all going to possibly die. 5 previous extinctions, whether it's 10 years or 1,000 years from now, it's going to happen. Life is meant to pass on. It's not a problem. Yeah. I'm reading a book by Michio Kaku right now called The Future of Humanity. And he says one of the greatest myths about people that think that they're going to live, that's going to be immortal. Scientists today are seeing 3 levels of extinction. Planetary, human, anthropocentric, planetary, galactic, 4. Human, planetary, because the planet will dissolve because of the sun's overheating.
Yeah.
And then the galaxy is already in a terminal state. I didn't know that. Our galaxy that contains our solar system is already in its endgame. So it's not just the planet Earth and human life.
Yeah.
And so those who are in sci-fi and science fiction already are thinking about how to extract consciousness and neurological programming from the anatomical structure so that we can move through the greatest obstacle is how to move form beyond form so that time isn't an issue where we have to pee and bathe and eat to find a new location, trans-Mars. We need to think out of the galactic bubble.
Transdimensionally.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what interests me today. It's not becoming like, nimble and flexible and, and vegan and all of which are cool, but it's terminal. We need people who are like kind of combined astrophysical, trans-ayahuasca, post-entheogenic behaviors, trans-enlightenment states that think out of the box, very much like a young kid or like what you did perhaps. But what I did, that's artistic, it's creative, they're athletic, they're angst-driven, they're existentially savant artistic. And they're thinking in ways that like, oh my God, put rhymes together, do a little bit of, they've created hip hop. They created, sacred techno. They've got house jazz, whatever it is. What's the new music that's post-life as we know it?
It's sort of also like things are a lot of information seems to be encoded in a very fractal-based, self-similar,
that's right,
recursive geometry sort of thing. And it's interesting that sort of the passage to maybe liberation is through occupying the other. And if you look at how to be like translingual, trans-object, trans-dimensionality, it probably comes back again to occupation of the other, like what is not consciousness, what is not form, what is not language. What is
now you're touching places that I can really feel that you think of partnership and relationship and intimacy and sexuality and eroticism and all of that, which are beautiful in form and flesh, but there's also all of those that are transform in flesh.
Yeah.
And I think these kind of existential, call them emotional thought experiments that we can do with each other and with, polarized, existential, feminine, masculine, whatever the ways are that we define thisness, so that we begin to play beyond the forms and we record these things and we videotape them, we podcast them, we vodcast them, so that we, oh my God, did you realize that you just had the first few thoughts about the next level of post-theory of relativity?
Yeah.
I think we're that close because it's not going to be resolved on the level, as Einstein said, of how the problem was created.
Yeah.
We can't outlive the earth, and yet we have to think of life post-earth, post-solar system, post-galaxy.
It's interesting you mentioned Einstein because that's really like the theory of relativity, or to be is to be related, essentially, and that sort of microcosm that is, whether it's an intimate lover or partner, that in these like high ecstatic moments you experience a sense of it's kind of like the sense of paradox, essentially, that sort of that space translingual, transform, trans flesh, that maybe in its highest expression, whether it's Mother Teresa or Jesus or somebody or Buddha, where their sense of self became so much everything other than themselves, that being trans self is about recognizing that the true self is that you're just a manifestation of the total as your true self. And then in that sharing, in that sort of level of trans self, that these people are so revered for that, the personality and character that they left as their legacy. But that we as like individuals, that's why we would form more intimate, more developed relationships, because in the like more micro sense of being able to give and take care and care for others in your immediate vicinity, that sort of trans self paradox moment gets to be
I think you're right on. The trans self concept speaks to the transportation of self as we identify with self into a new dimension of post-self, but could very well still be an existential, ephemeral self, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So we need to think in trans-earthly mortal life terms and begin to move into, I would say, call frequencies of interbeing that allow us transportation of consciousness and intelligences that leave behind artifacts in unnecessary forms of existential political baggage, worn out, tired metaphors, and have some filtering system and move intelligences into a safer zone where we can create and explore even deeper, more safer areas of life. We're not in a safe zone here.
No, we're still in the vestiges of old violent crap, basically.
Environmentally and internally.
Yeah.
And it's outmoded that you and I are able to at least know as individuals greed, anger, and delusion are useless to the human psyche, except how well can we accelerate through them to eradicate them from the genome of shared space. At the same time, why do we need things that consume us on this planet? We're in a physical sphere that no matter how right we get it, it's still wrong. And because we're on a planet that's near a sun star, it's going to get hotter and hotter and incinerate life on our planet.
Eventually, yes.
And people might think that that's not fluffy at all. That's someone who's got a fair degree of far-reaching compassion. Listen, 4 generations ago, you and I had mom and dads. Call them whatever, great.
Yeah.
They fought hard on some level to survive and put forth principles and values. You and I are talking today based upon some people, collective people, having a high regard for freedom of speech, freedom of mind, scientific evidence to put together these incredible instruments. And here we've got, even as much as we criticize technology, we're being filmed and recorded. There's an intelligence here. I would want you to be a savant of higher order intelligences, not a custodian only of the curriculum of ordinary day-to-day. Do that well, yes. Clean your room, take care of your body, take care of your emotional life. At the same time, think and dream not just your own vision of success, but think out of the fucking box. That today is the entheogenic metaphor. Enough trauma work being healed. There's no time to heal our trauma. We're in an emergency.
Yeah. Well, and like you're saying, Einstein can't fix the problem with the same tools that fixed it. And I think a lot of the time we're maybe we're just like rhetorically informing, to inform, but rather than because outside the box would be to X form, for example, and just just a lot of rhetoric and just being shared between groups with lack of action sometimes. Hard to push a stone that is the infrastructure and the establishment of fossil fuel industries or whatever it is.
Well, this is where I'm pushing on my edge, is rather than the need for personal healing, namaste, do it as well as you need. But after a while, there is no ultimate self-healing. The more that I feel, the more pain I feel. The more overcoming my own personal pain, the more human pain that I've denied that I was in denial of before. I feel the Tibetan, no longer just Alan. I feel the girl on the street in the level of trauma that she's in, the unborn traumas, the dying around the world traumas, the oceans that are being... You feel this and you go, my God, give me my own personal trauma back.
Yeah, it gets easier and easier to cry the more you open those doors, really.
But more to the point is, how well can we create safe moments, hours, days, vortexes, where interesting people can come together in a shared space? And how well can we support each other in being different and still being loved? So that we take risks to extend beyond our comfort zones, to say the unthinkable. Don't say something that's just because it's smart and you know it well. Don't just recite the Mary Oliver poem with Rumi yet again. Don't just do another Instagram post for how many followers and likes. What will you say and do, Alan, with Jesse, and Jesse with whom he's going to be with later today? That, okay, well, he'll be real, I'll be real, but what can we create next month? A soiree, an existential soiree that gives us a chance to experiment with new edges. And then look at those things as we did as a first draft and go, do you see anything in there that might give you a hint? Put a little bit of ayahuasca in there, put a little DMT in there, 5-MeO, do a little bit of marijuana, a little MDMA, mix a little low dose, high dose, meditate, do a little bit of breathing, a little pranayama, a little bit of silence, a little diet, fasting, create, tweak, film, video. Those thought experiments with men and women really interest me. I want a partner who wants to do that. I've done it in the past, and that to me is breaking the lockstep with the conformity of high structured spiritual psychological work today. We are the savants.
And there's I think in the modern world of that conversation, the sort of the overlooking, there's the frown down upon the overemphasis on the aesthetic, and consequently almost like a down looking at playing away the aesthetic. But I guess I feel that when you're looking at all of these angles, all these facets, ways of expressing, modalities of self-exploration, and then finding the aesthetic in all of those facets, is to make yourself, and to honor the fact that although you can be trans self, there is still your vehicle that you exist within, and its particular lens of perspective, but to refine those over time, and to make a high aesthetic, to make a high bhavana of it, and not to find denigration in, say, the world of yoga and the too high of aesthetic. We'd be like, oh, that girl's just totally putting it on like how she dresses or something like this. That there's a quick one to,
And on a more practical level, I'm speaking for myself to the psychic, intuitive, transhuman, transordinary shared space aesthetic. Like I was recently in Burma, as I mentioned, and I was reading one of the books by my teacher, my first teacher, Mahasi Sayadaw, who was one of the two main people in the Sixth Great Buddhist Council, really a meditation master, a very beautiful mind. His name was actually Usobana, which means beautiful states of consciousness, which is quite amazing. And in this book, he is reciting a story of the Buddha, which I didn't know about. If you can bear with me on this.
Yeah,
it's like a trans-Uparle story. It's even more interesting. In which it's the Lokiyadhamma Sutta, and the Buddha is giving a Dharma talk to not humans, but to devas, existential, the luminosity of beings with ephemeral bodies of light, which in classical Buddhist psychology, you may or may not know, are 6 dimensions that are co-occupying this space, but without the density of form as we see it. And they call them the Deva Lokas. And also above that, there are beings without form that are called the Brahma Lokas. And the Deva and the Brahma Lokas, or the Buddha is calling these creatures, these beings of being, together to give them a Dhamma talk on what is the Dhamma or the Dharma, what is liberation, and how do you generate your own suffering within these ephemeral realms.
Okay.
And so he decides to duplicate his body in this discourse. I had no idea that he did this.
Okay.
He decides to duplicate his body and have the body speak to himself as a Buddha in a preset of dialogues that he figured were more interesting as a dialogue for the Devas and for the Brahmas than him just giving the Dharma talk.
Okay.
So he's programming a duplicate body to have a conversation, a forum with himself. I had no idea these were in the classical Buddhist text. Now, the point being is that, okay, that someone's got, real or metaphorical, someone is pointing to the metaphysics, the pre and the post metaphysics of shared space to be so available to the intelligence of those who can enter those intelligences, to configure what you and I are doing right now in multiple disciplines of intelligences, of speech, of sound, of formation. It's like it gave me this sense of radical, compelling inspiration to learn more of the vocabulary, if you will, of these more ephemeral shared spaces. And it's not fluffy, it's deeply real, because we are, I think anyone who's done anything entheogenic or psychedelic knows, if you relax enough, that consciousness is this incredibly manifesting luminosity that imbued in the phenomena is an intelligence. How do we occupy mindfully the intelligences that animate thisness? That to me is the spiritual journey. And not to get too enamored, if you will, with where you're fusing and identifying, because that identification will only congeal you into a self, and all of a sudden now you've objectified a situation. So the key here is how to maintain discernment and empiricism without self-centricity.
Well, there's this I call it the story about the Buddha is very interesting, because it's like there's like a double dialectic always happening. So you have your internal dialectic. It's like the internal conversation you have with yourself. You're like, don't do that, don't do that. Like, who are you talking to when you're talking to someone? There's always this inner dialectic, and then there's the conversation with you and your environment. It's like the secondary dialectic, and it like really. Yeah, it's just how it.
And I, we were both in Bali, as we said, and I don't know how long you were there. But I was there for 4 months. I lived there for 4 years in Newport before. But one of the things I love about the dynamic there, at least in the circles I was hanging, is the fidelity and the compelling, more intimate fidelity with energy.
Especially the locals there. I noticed there's a lot. It's a pretty spirity world, actually, to be honest.
Yeah.
The amount of disturbances I had in my sleep and crazy dreams, some scary ones, some wild ones, and just some pretty.
Well, it's a vortex for consciousness.
Oh yeah, it's just
people are alive to the dynamic of what is this environment. Call me in this consciousness, and how to stay in sensitivity to the intelligence and the frequency of learning more intuitive ways to think and feel and to occupy this with wisdom, so that I care for the aesthetic of shared space. I'm aware of my configurations as much as humanly possible, of what denigrates and brings in a contraction to myself and you. I'm aware of my fear. I'm aware as much as possible of my greed. I'm aware of my pride as much as humanly possible. And our friendships are born from a willingness, a courage to not collude or enable shame, fear, doubt, greed, anger, and delusion, but to not call it out particularly, but aesthetically elevate through it. So that you and I are more about freedom than we are about agreement. Our agreements are to freedom more than agreement to shared language.
Totally. I think you see it a lot in the Balinese people too, and even when you go to Lombok, and whether it's as Muslim over there, something about stopping 5 times a day or 3 times a day for, it might just be a 5-10 minute prayer, the water blessing at the temple. I always just notice when you get your change at a store, the slowness and intention that people are behaving with a different agreement to a higher sort of integrity, like they're slowing down in a way that is not normal to your normal pace of kind of unconscious low-level greed, anger, and delusion.
I'm sure that's worldwide. I don't like defining the suburb of Bali as the sacred spot, but there's such a high concentration of people there and going there and living and imbuing the space with a contact to an energy that isn't just about form. And they're also equally, meditation is the practice of evolving trans-physical intelligences into their most luminous, greedless, fearless, ignoranceless dynamic. And I love people who are connected to that Dharma. But more to the point I'm trying to make in my own clumsy way is I've done 40 years of ardent, so-called spiritual, psychological, existential work. It's not a failed mission, but it has been a modicum of success. I feel more content in myself. I could die today and I'm okay. I've lived well, but what I'm concerned about is a new invigoration, if you will, of the psychedelic metaphor. Like if I were to do a high dose of the metaphor rather than the substance, or even a low dose but of the metaphor, that luminous 20% extra of consciousness, how could I do that? When will I do that more frequently without the dose itself? And that's the challenge of your yoga, your meditation, your intimacy today, is to live in the most intimate frequencies that give you the most courage to think beyond just this life, just my needs, just my genital, just my tantra, just my globe, but what is the best course of action for the future of life? We have to be participants in stewardship today, and it may not be sustaining the world as we know it, which doesn't mean it's not a downer to die. But we are just programmed by genetics and by cosmos to be mortal.
And maybe the solution sometimes is a bit we're in our myopia, as per our own mortality, our propensity to objectify everything. It often, like paradise, exists in the peripheral. So in that slowed down moment of your day where, be focused, be concentrated, but it's the sort of outside the box to truly feel your environment. There's a lot of, and it's the people at the periphery that we should be worried about and thinking about. The problems of the world are pretty obvious, and we need to focus our energy greatly on those, but probably the execution of actually solving them. I think if we exist in that myopic, too focused objectification world of fixing the problem, for example, then we're doing that problem that I'd say can't be done. So where do we? Yeah, I guess just that slow down really.
Well, yeah, I think each to their own on some level, but at the same time, since we're sharing the most intimate places, at least trying, I am, I would, having been in positions of vulnerability, and also watching my mom and dad and several of my friends pass on, being in hospice, and of course you yourself have dealt with that up close. And also many people talk about the planet being in hospice today. What's a respectful course of presence? And just as I would want to be cared for, I would want to think that I could care for others equally to the way I'd want to be cared for. And so that spiritual mandate of caring, we talked about it earlier, is something I try to carry with me as vocation that informs my yoga, not just presence and happiness, but how well can I occupy discomfort? How many times I walk down the street past people who are needy, fearful, how people walk by who look privileged to me, and how easy it is to kind of smile and snarl at the same time, you haughty, pseudo-spiritualite. I walk through Whole Foods and see so many people in denial of what it costs to bring in that butter from New Zealand, that mango from Mexico. And yet they're organic and they're real, and they got designer lives, designer kids, designer jobs, designer everything, and designer denial. And how I'm a fixture of that same form of denial. More to the point, how well do I care for people right in front of me? One of the things you mentioned about Bali, which I equally concur with, no matter how much you deviate from the moment, most Balinese by conditioning, I don't know whether or not it's because they are who they are or whether they want your money, I don't know anymore. But by and large, even beyond both of those extremes, they show up in a way that is curious about you, to the point where I'm going like, holy shit, man, these people are like mastered communication. They like, who are you? What do you do? They're smiling, they're making eye contact. They not only slow you down, but they bring you out. And so bringing each other out.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, how wonderful it would be if we had salons and soirees and cafes, well, Ubud and Bali and Canggu are like that, where you can actually go out, and the custom is to communicate and to connect.
Yeah,
You agree, right?
Yeah, it's fluid.
So I guess what I'm longing for is more intimacy through all this kind of existential, the lexicon of hope comes down to how well did I live today? How deeply will I sleep tonight? How well did I occupy my dignity, my conscience? And the old-fashioned word, how well did I care about you and me, the stranger, and how well, are we caring for the future of life today? What are we doing today to influence that future?
A little bit of my friend, what did we call it? Called it a bit like a Jesus principle, sort of the story, the mythos that is ascension through self-sacrifice. And so that like a moment where you really have to be on time or early to meet someone for a coffee, but some weirdo stranger's trying to talk to you on the street and you just don't have time for it. Really, you're kind of like coveting your time, your abstraction of time. But that moment when you sacrifice your thing, yourself, your free time for a useless conversation that someone just needed to say hello to, or and it's so curious how like different doors will open, like different synchronicities will open down the way. Like the more times you sacrifice your whatever it is you're sacrificing, your time, your money, your efforts, your energy, seems to like open up all these like curious little doors, and
that's right.
And then as you do the opposite, those doors just close and you end up like more and more.
Yeah, just think of a very practical solution. Hey, I'm going to be a little bit late because I'm serving someone here who's dying on the street.
Yes.
Get a coffee on me.
Yeah, and they're just there's small things sometimes, and they open surprisingly large doors for.
When I was a monk in Burma, when I was actually 29 at the time, and I was near death actually because of illness. A series of unexpected illnesses, including an operation that went astray for a tumor. And these people who were caring for me, and I was unable to care for myself. I couldn't walk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't move. I had hepatitis, I had typhoid, I was infected. And they would, put water on your lip.
So you could drink a little bit.
They pick you up and take you to the toilet.
Oh, wow.
You know, that's who we are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we take, I don't know about you, but I easily take for granted that I can do this with my hands until by some act of God or the devil, they're gone. And imagine being in love without being able to use your hands.
Mm.
Think about sex without hands.
Yeah.
Think about drinking and eating without hands. Imagine I walk down the streets of Ubud navigating motorcycles, and yet when I get to where I'm going, how many beautiful men and how many beautiful women, not just physically, but there's something radiant about people when you're feeling radiant.
Mm-hmm.
And I sometimes wonder, oh wow, how easy it is to fixate on my conditioning, and I'm looking at him or her, or I'm looking at attributes of him and her, and I imagine being blind and how conditioned I am by my eye to feel beauty.
Mm.
When in fact I wonder if I can reinvent how the feeling, perception, can be understood more on a visceral, energetic level to beautify, as my teacher's name was, Usobana, beautiful states of mind. He's not saying how well you look at people's cultural beauty,
Mm-hmm.
culturally sanctioned beauty. And so you bring up Jesus, you know, what is our true wealth? Well, meditation, yoga, living is about the beautification of consciousness. What else is there in this universe except the awe and the wonderment of fascinating structures? But ultimately in acid trips and ayahuasca trips and DMT trips, MDMA trips,
Mm-hmm.
lovemaking, to me it's the evolution of beautiful states of mind.
And I liked what you said the other day on that other podcast. I remember hearing that it was that it's the everything as well. It's like that.
Oh yeah. Rather than being in the now, it's everything.
Yeah, and like not to but to see something beautiful and not be like, wow, that's just the object of consciousness that is my eye, and it's deeper than that. Well, it is deeper than that, but it's also that. And because then I think maybe the seeker mind has a propensity to want to denigrate the things that don't serve, but in the end, really, they're just all things. They're all facets of consciousness manifest, and and the deeper knit is seen it as like a total blanket, maybe that it's everything. Because it's pretty quick. Like the mind always wants the upper hand. You know, we always want to. Okay, now I got it. And point at the. It's not vision. It's deeper than vision. It's deeper than hearing. It's more like the mirage of it. I like the idea. I thought of this morning. You know what a timing cap is on a car? It like spins really fast and you shine a strobe light at it.
No.
It's called a timing distributor in a car. So as it's spinning, it matches up your spark plugs, how they fire.
Oh wow.
And then you take a strobe light, and when you shine the light on it, it's kind of like when you see a car passing you and it's just the right speed. It looks like the hubcaps are spinning backwards.
Oh yeah.
So when the strobe light matches the right timing, then it stands, all the points stand 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like all the firing points. But if the timer's off, then you can see that it doesn't match the light. And so you have these like constituents and facets of consciousness and its myriad of manifestations. And in its spinning, our attention as the strobe light seems to produce this like seemingly static situation. Like we seem static, but we're more just this like fluctuation of a timing belt almost. Just like manifesting all of these different myriads of conscious manifestation. And it's just like our propensity to become myopic and be like, well, it's not the vision, it's not the this. I just like how you said, it's like really taking in the everything as it arises as intimately as you can.
And coming back to my mom again, just it brought up listening to you, and then listening to me, listening to you, listening to me. How easy it is to, to not just to interrupt, but to unknowingly diminish presence, intimacy, and now time openness. I often think of later. And it's natural to think and be responsible with later commitments. But how easy it is to empower things that aren't happening right here. and therefore diminish things that are happening here for the perception of how better it would be somewhere else.
Well, the grass is always greener, syndrome.
So we talk about beauty, and it's more from how to beautify the existing rather than to negate that which is, to project beauty in the future. I was looking at my mom in my mind's eyes, what I'm trying to get at, and she didn't have the virtue of being able to leave her body, leave her room, leave her wheelchair, leave her bed. She had to be where she was. And it's something very terrifying about that for me.
Yeah, well, especially if you I think in one of your talks recently you called it an insidious form of personal slavery, to constantly value your particular present moment as per the lack of its future better, grass is always greener kind of syndrome. And it's one thing to do it and then just walk out of the house and get a coffee, but it's another thing to be stricken to a bed or a wheelchair and to imagine also having that state of consciousness without anywhere to run to distract.
Well, this is one of the great things I think that's overlooked often in relationships. I mean, it's the opposite of swipe left on Tinder, which is if you take the legs off of your being, and you take the hands off it, and you kind of okay, let me occupy this space with you, get through the obstacle, and recommit to the deeper places of intimacy and trust and openness, and evolve this great relationship that we have through this struggle. I think we're missing a lot of how diamonds are formed in relationship for the sake of, empowering coal to be diamond. Staying put, taking the future neurotic momentum out of the moment. Meditation is learning, as you know very well, learning how to occupy where you are and take that neurotic momentum of a better place to be than where you are off the table, and see that it's an inner journey.
Well, it totally does affect relationships, and I think we come from a lot of people would argue that our sort of maybe ancient, maybe more polyamorous sort of state of being, biologically speaking, for a long time it was what it was, and maybe 12,000 years ago with the exchange of land and the agricultural revolution, we entered a monogamy area of just basically families trading sibling or trading offspring for land and stuff like this. And then through the Romantic period, it turned into the Romantic period, love for the sake of love beyond agricultural land exchanges. And then with the women empowerment movement, love has just taken this evolution over time from probably historically maybe a more polyamorous history, but that's not to say that the way we were behaving 10,000 years ago was very good at all. And so we've evolved society in many ways past this. And so we have this high divorce rate now, and the way people relate to each other in the short term is maybe a symptom of our short-term satisfaction and our obsession with sex. But in the end, so people are kind of happy, but just a bunch of coal dust, and those gems of, you'll see a lot of people in their 70s we've been together for a while, it was a lot of work. They're you see the odd couple who are older, who are genuinely, soulmates, still having fun.
This is where we're really challenging all forms of previous success and conformity, and being in that new edge of exploration of what does it mean to be intimate with another human being and evolve the great attributes of trust, of safety, of transparency, of honesty. I mean, ultimately, if you're honest with one another and you both agree that honesty is the commitment of why we're together, well, you can pretty much deal with anything that you need to deal with.
Yeah.
But for me, I recognize my personality structure. I like questioning. I feel envy. I feel jealousy. I don't want to deal with it. It's just that simple. And I'm not judging anything to do with open or polyamory thing. Each to their own. But I'm more like the pigeon or the penguin. I like to pair off. And I like to dive deeper into that. And I grow in intimacy by learning how to make love in different ways than just your vagina.
Yeah, no, totally.
It's trans-tantric.
Yeah.
It's an energy.
Well, it's a high fixation of the human condition that those high ecstatic moments of sexual relations seem to color the rest of the day, despite their 5% or 2% representation. And then we do these weird things with other, where in, say, a high ecstatic moment, you sort of see this person as goddess or god, couldn't be more perfect, And then there's the other 98% of the day, right, that you like kind of would judge a god or goddess against. And so we get into these traps of comparing a moment to the rest of the day when the rest of the day should be informing the moment. Gets a bit backwards in anyone in tight company. Like I just had some friends on a three-month trip to some remote islands, and like, so did you guys know? Oh yeah, like of course we got at it. You know, you got to bicker with someone if you're gonna spend 3 months, 24 hours a day with the person. Like, it's natural, you know, it's natural for people to get this way. I think it comes from the translation of high moment 1% to informing the rest of the day sometimes. But it's worth it, I think. That's the,
I think it brings up the issue of what is friendship.
Yeah.
When you're having an intimate relationship with someone, what are you really liking about the other person? Mm-hmm. And to learn more of how to communicate those likes, to evolve those likes. How do you really celebrate the other person, learning the qualities of mind that take you out of your need and bring you more into how to support the elevation, the beauty, the happiness of the other person, so that there's this shared kind of confluence. At the same time, there's a symphony, a jazz, a reciprocity of goodness that you give to each other, so that when you do have difficult moments, you have that bond of like, you know, we really are down with each other. We really love each other.
It's difficult, but funny's funny. I mean, you gotta bring some humor to the table.
Absolutely.
It only gets better with time. Like, your best friends are the ones you've known for 20, 30,
the only
40.
The only women in my life who are not in my life today are the ones who lied to me repeatedly. They're shame driven.
Harsh
ones, but the ones who were there, despite the difficulties, we're down, we're still tight. The next day after our relationship shifted forms, we continue to evolve as lovers in a different way. But those who transgressed in ways that brought them shame and worry and doubt and lied, they can't handle, where was it? The shadow was greater than friendship. Mm-hmm. And the invitation's there to evolve upward. I'm not going to hold a grudge. I mean, I was down with you because I really liked you. I mean, I think that's one of the missing things in love, is how well do we really like the other person. Yeah,
well, we're all caught up, like, there's that objectification. There's such a high propensity of the mind. It's one of the things I just noticed, the highest high of the stickiest sticky for the mind and the heart is we're just so good at drawing maps. You know, we draw boxes around everything, and then we navigate our hand to our face, or our ass to the bathroom, or whatever it is we're navigating. But it requires us to draw boundaries around things. And so, like, time is just an abstract idea, a construct, but you know, we give it a boundary, a start and a finish, and its limitations to what we can perceive of it, and then we move around with haste of its excess or lacking thereof, and then we do the same with people. You know, we objectify a person. No one likes to be objectified, and nothing does. And it's maybe one of our biggest strengths and impasses at the same time.
Well, that damn dopamine pump that we brought into it. Hello, I'm not objectifying you. Hello, I love you. Would you send me another one of those shots again? I'm not objectifying you.
I swear I'm not. Yeah.
Next, what was your name? I mean, I'm not objectifying you. I mean, it's like we objectify ourselves. I mean, it's a culture of mirrors. Yeah. And it's ultimately, it's not to pathologize, but it's to seek, I would call the word, I use it rarely, radical remedies for the things that compromise the qualities of your own soul. At the end of the day, I see people who are successful, who've come to meditation retreats, who've come to me for support, who are crying out, Jesse, I've not been met because I've lied to them and I've lied to myself. I've knew super successful people, multimillionaires who are applauded around the world, Oscar-winning producers and directors and actors, super best-selling authors. And they'll come and just say, it's empty because I've lied. I've not known how to tell the truth to my own soul or to fulfill my own emotional needs. People don't really know me because I don't know me. How do you know yourself? How do you learn? Should I do ayahuasca? Should I do DMT? Should I do MDMA therapy? Should I go on a vision quest? Should I look in the mirror and go to Osho and look at my body naked? Should I go to a tantra workshop? How do I know myself? And how do I come to terms with the integrity of that knowing and trust that knowing to be true? I am not just 100,000 followers on Instagram that show my body, my yoni, my namaste, my nipple, and I'm basically posing for someone to masturbate on me, boys and girls. You know, and that's not success. That's an extreme measure.
Yeah,
but there are a lot of people who live in the pretense of that pride and in the opposite, which is the fear of who they are, to be shame and ugly.
Mm-hmm.
Those two extremes exist. How do you authenticate the ugliness and the beauty of your being? How do you overcome these struggles, these cultural artifices, these mirrors of distortion? What's required today to live in peace with what you have? Who taught you to hate the shape of your teeth?
Mm.
Who taught you the shape of your breast? Why do you need a breast implant? Is it more suckable? Why do you need filler at 23 years old? Why do you need a Kardashian lip?
Yeah.
Why do you need a Kardashian ass? Are you hoping to be butt fucked in a way that's more culturally acceptable? I mean, what is the need to fit in? So slavery is a very interesting concept for me.
Mm-hmm.
There's one form of slavery that's cruel. There's another form of slavery that's seductive.
Yeah. Well, you're acting against your basic impulse for the sake of conformity, like in fear of some sense of punishment, personal punishment.
And you are punished in society by not having what you need.
You're your own prison master at that point, right? It's like the easiest kind of form of slavery.
No wonder there's bulimia. No wonder there's eating disorders. No wonder there's drug addiction.
So
no wonder there's teen suicide.
There's two things though. There's like one, or like what to do. I mean, you ask the question, what do we do? Sometimes I notice that it's the last thing you want to do is the first thing you maybe should do. Whether smoking's ruining your life, or you thought you wanted to give someone a gift, but the first thing that pops to your mind is that thing that you really don't want to give them. Just kind of shows you how much like attachment and weight you have to a particular thing, and so sometimes the last thing to come to your mind is the first thing you should maybe do. But that being said, it's not always the easiest route. It's not necessarily going to work. And then the second one is, I kind of forgot what it was there.
Well, you prompted me to think of one.
Sure.
Maybe it'll come. It's what can we do with each other that actually reinvents the paradigm of transformation? Is to stop teaching and stop glorifying as much as humanly possible. And people, I'll put it this way, people often ask me, what would you say is the best form of teaching? To reveal how you've lied, to reveal how you've deceived yourself. Not to teach other about what they need to do, therefore creating victims in front of you. I'm enlightened, you're not, this is how you do it, this is a guide to enlightenment, let me show you how to be in the moment. That's one old paradigm that has not worked. Reveal to me the ways in which you live in the moment and the value of that. Talk to me about the ways that you deceive yourself. Tell me the shortcomings that you've seen. Are you in deception? How have you seen that you've empowered ignorance over insight? And how did you see that ignorance through an emergence of insight? Talk to me about your process in a more authentic way. Do you lie to your partners? Do you live a double life, a quadruple life, a triple life? Do you see that porn is more interesting than the lover that you have? What aren't you bringing to the stage of truth? Truth-telling.
And I guess what do they say, one of the best ways to learn is to become a teacher in a sense. Like if you want to teach somebody math and then you're going to teach them math, well, you kind of have to know the math yourself, and then teaching is sort of a reiterative process for yourself that helps you learn it more. And so if you're maybe sharing of your transgressions and what's not working and you're lying to yourself and stuff, and then teaching others that, which doesn't put them in a position of feeling taught, especially since it's like a self-deprecating sort of exercise.
That taught story plays right into the cultural predilection towards projection and disempowerment of self.
Nobody likes to hear that.
And it's, back in the day when I taught enlightenment, I had many followers. When I shifted that to authenticity, most of them ran. It was funny. When I was a Buddhist enlightened meditation teacher, everyone wanted to come and be enlightened. These kind of cultural abstractions that don't really exist except as fabrications that you kind of have inherited as a lie for commercial values or shame-based sexual desire needs don't really exist. I mean, look at all the predation in the Catholic Church. Look at all the predation in the Buddhist Church. Look at all the predation in the Vipassana Satipatthana Church. Look at all the predation across the board in the yoga world. Gurus are anathema to transformation. It's turned out they're the biggest false prophets. Really what we're pointing to here is not to blame, but to reinvent what transformation could look like, which means that you and I, the gift that we can provide each other is to reveal how we've learned and how we're learning. It's a non-hierarchical, intimate, transformational, self-revealing model. It's not just revealing transgressions, but to show me how you've gotten insight. Talk to me about the process. But to be real with me. How different it would be if an enlightened teacher came in and told their throngs. I've realized I did a private ayahuasca session down in Canggu, and I realized that enlightenment, that I assumed that I was enlightened, actually was false. And they've had 5 bestsellers, they've got 500,000 students around the world, they've got a Patreon account of bringing in $1 million a minute, you know, they've got teacher trainings going on about the world with teachers they've already trained, and all of them now realize my teacher's next great insight of his enlightenment or her enlightenment was that I'm not enlightened at all. Now, mind you, within all of this, there's carnage that I want to share with you. I've been having pedophilia-like relationships with most of the children. I've been having extramarital sex with most of the women who've been married to my best friends. And I've been not just lying about my enlightenment, I've been lying about the money. I've extorted $1 billion into the Cayman Islands, and I'm coming clean. Now, that would not necessarily be seen as spiritually enlightening. But you could be sure if they got the message, everyone else in their own way, what have you not been telling the truth about?
Yeah.
A big chorus of shared ignorance being revealed. And that's probably what's needed on the planet today, is leaders, politicians, popes, priests, presidents, anyone out there who is in positions of power. Let's be more vulnerable. One big confessional of what I don't know, what I'm lying to you about. And to come down off the fear as much as humanly possible of the game of retribution and revenge, and to create safe zones. I don't have to hold it up so much. I don't have to pretend as much. I don't need to hire another ghostwriter to write a book, a bestseller, and lie to my agents about it. How many books, how many songs are being written by other people that have nothing to do with the individual that we empower as the strength of the artist, the teacher, the enlightened guru?
Well, and that comes right down, I mean, for the average individual in the world who's not a guru, a teacher, or maybe a leader who should, you know, share that level of transparency, and we hope that will happen, but then right down to the level of the individual is like, yeah, no, I forgot my coffee cup and I got a to-go one anyways.
Killer point.
I forgot my bags, the reusable ones I was taking to the store. I forgot to do XYZ. There's so many facets to the polemic, the problem that is our global complex. Like, it's really, really convoluted, and there's tops to a pyramid, which is really just the top of a star tetrahedron. There's pyramids all around it probably. But that's the, you know, for the 99% of everyone who should be led by the leaders who should act this way, who may or may not. We should all be sharing that amongst ourselves anyways.
Absolutely.
In a much more comical sort of.
And stop teacher trainings and have teachings that are being shared. Teaching trainings, not teacher trainings, that are more non-hierarchical, and they're not in your lineage. We're in a post-lineage period.
Totally, yeah.
Post-tradition, post-orthodoxy. And really it comes down to, the closest word that I can see to it is mentoring. And primarily mentoring is the etiquette and the intelligence of how I have learned, and you're safe to ask questions, but don't follow the evidence of my journey. That should be a prerequisite among us, is no two of us will do it alike. There are principles, there are values, there are states of consciousness, there are primary colors on the palette of shared space, but by and large, your creation is your creation. I don't want to tell my daughter what to paint and how to paint, any more than I want to tell you how to dance or how to make love. There isn't a right way to be free, as long as it respects the freedom of others. When in doubt, your guru is your fingerprint. No two of us will do it alike. It's anti-ism.
And it must become, I mean, I've noticed along the path in self-development, my intellectual growth, my spiritual development, like, I think for a lot of people in the world who aspire to be teachers, that there's this with so much unboxing and unpacking of the corners of your ego, your mind, your limitations, your spiritual dogma. The more you unpack, the mind's so quick to sweep it all up into a big bow wrapped backpack that you put back on your back. And like that humility that comes with further growth is very difficult along the path for a lot of would-be seekers, would-be leaders, would-be teachers. And I think the pride and ego down the road after so much personal development can just kind of like catch a person right back up in that delusion.
You know, I had a teacher. You met U Pandita?
No, I didn't.
He was the successor to Mahasi Sayadaw. So when he passed away, Sayadaw U Pandita became my guide. He just died in 96. You know that we did this book together. He and I had 9 nights of conversation called Wisdom for the World, which he named, and the requisites of reconciliation. But more to the point is that he was masterful in 6 or 7 languages. He had a greeting room that was about 12 feet high with bookshelves from floor to ceiling with ladders.
Oh yeah.
And I saw him, for the 40 years that I knew him intimately well, be so radically curious about you. It would be like, no therapist would ask these many questions. And it really taught me a lot that those among us, those rare individuals that actually do embody some degree of wisdom and compassion, are super curious about other people. It's like the opposite of teaching as we know it. And I found that in my dialogues with him, he brought me out of myself. He brought me out of my fear. He brought me out of my shame. He brought me out of my worry. He brought me into my curiosity, into my wonderment, into my empowerment by having this masterful individual who was, you know, the teacher of many monasteries and many tens of thousands of students and many teachers around the world, although he'd never sanctioned one teacher, including me, to be a teacher. They all claimed that they were students of him, that he empowered them to teach, but he never did that. He never gave anyone who was not a monk or a nun any support to ever teach meditation, which is really compelling. Rather, what he did is he shared the elements and the intimacy and the aesthetics of teachings. He was an embodiment of Dhamma, or Dharma, of liberation and awakening and action. And he would say to me, Alan, there's no need to teach. Just be yourself. Share what you know and let people see and overhear how you've learned. Come down off the idea of teaching at people. And he was a living embodiment of the living question, if you will, Jesse. That's what I really, really enjoy about people. And I must say it's a shortcoming of mine, is how I meet people all the time like you do. We travel a lot. We're curious people. How curious are you? I'm not asking for therapeutic investigation of my being, but
well, I think it's just that
ask questions.
Yeah.
Of each other.
Especially each other, and share, like, that's the... I'm always abstract. I'm just like constantly an overthinker as a person sometimes, but that, like, as a teacher, sometimes you think you've got the goods because you've been close to the ledge of now, as one might talk about knowledge. But even your own perspective is always changing. The speed of light is always changing, apparently. Like, there's no true solidity to the fabric and nature of experience. And your perspective, even if you know or you think you've gained an insight, that you would collect it and imagine it not to change, that you could share it as such, is probably what keeps us, like, you know, limited in learning. And that, like, essence of questioning and wonder and mystery that is, like, in conversation or dialectic with someone, because all experience is dialectic and relational, that curiosity comes from never being sure, or I think maybe U Pandita said, fostering a mind free of conclusions is a free mind,
well
I think.
Said. Yeah, good memory.
Yeah. And
have a mind free of conclusions.
And so, like, sometimes it might feel like you're just openly digesting, or in a conversation with someone, as long as your dialectic isn't you're recounting your spiritual journey or information or insights that you have as stated fact, that you can, like, have a dialect with someone where you explain your philosophy and they explain theirs, and and then they intermingle, and that's like the process
That's
of
right.
learning from each other rather than teaching someone a thing.
Beautiful.
But you still have to get sort of your personal
Well, that's
angle on it.
beautifully expressed for me to hear that. Thank you. And another element of this is there a lawfulness? Is there a discernible architecture, a physics, a mathematics that defines discernible, knowable, shared space? There's an anatomy. We have surgeons, brain surgeons, heart transplant. There's expertise. Is there an intelligence that we're embedded in that can be discerned like a surgeon does to the brain, to the heart, to the lungs? That's called the Dharma, as you know, in Sanskrit, and Dhamma in Pali Buddhist. U Pandita, Mahasi Sayadaw, those types of individuals live in a discernible Dhamma or Dharma, where they don't just teach it on Sundays to a group who come to the monastery. They live and breathe that teaching because that's what they're defining their presence by. And in conversation with you, they're living in that dialectic, that intelligence with you. So U Pandita taught, if you will, by living in authenticity to his Dhamma. And he conscripted you in an invitational way, an elegant way. Do you want to participate in Dhamma with me here and now? It wasn't just awe and wonderment and curiosity. Let me invite you into a dialogue of Dhamma, an energetic of Dhamma. And what that meant was, from his point of view, as I studied with him, how well do we commingle in a way in which fear, anger, shame, worry, doubt, greed, denial, ignorance are being seen, felt, and relaxed. And how well do we see that generosity, love, compassion, kindness, sympathetic joy, patience, equanimity, composure, invitation, delight are being felt and evolved. And how well can we relax? How well can we co-evolve the beauty? And so they call that the shared practice of bhavana, the beautification of shared space. And that's what U Pandita and Mahasi did. Its name was named that, Usobana. The development of beautiful states of mind aren't just inhabiting one's own beauty, but how well do I play in the music, the shared, metasphere of you and I together in playful, beautiful states of mind. And that interests me because, like we speak English, they speak Dharma. And Dharma can be understood like we can a language.
Yeah. Well, it's that dance. That's like the dance is transverbal, translingual, but it is its own language.
It's a discernible language. And that's, for all of my railing against Buddhism, it's one of the most compelling for me languages that point to energies of consciousness. It's like the most intimate level of articulation about art that I've ever seen. And it's experiential philosophy. It's transformational wisdom. It points to, you can learn the language and you can learn the energy. Meditation is learning the energy of transformational wisdom for the elevation of love, compassion, and freedom, and the overcoming of greed, anger, and delusion. And they're very skillful not even pointing this out with you, but how available are you to it?
Because the language, for all its beauty, is often the impasse to access sometimes.
Yeah, they don't want to push it on you. Like U Pandita, before he died, in our book together, he said, don't teach Buddhism. Evolve and embody and illuminate what it means to be human for yourself and share that with someone. Come down off dogma, come down off ism, come down off your memory of me even. Which is very vulnerable, very authentic.
Yes.
Very beautiful. So can I invite, should we?
Yeah, where are we at here? You gotta get out of here. Alan's moving
I
today.
just could go on for another hour.
I know.
A beautiful conversation.
There's more to come. We'll have to do this again.
And I just have an intuitive feel that we've just created a beautiful album together. And I think, for me, unless you want to go on to make a double album out of it, which we can have a second coming, if you want. But
of course.
Shall we pause?
Yeah, no, totally. I'll do a closure on this podcast interview. Thanks for listeners joining us, me and Alan Clements. I'll just do, let's do it now. Jeez. You can visit Alan Clements at worlddharma.com, his personal website, as well as patreon.com/Alan Clements.
Yeah.
And you're probably on Facebook, Instagram.
I'm on Facebook and Instagram, Alan Clements World Dharma.
Perfect. Yeah. So
And you're on One Kind Mind.
OneKindMind.org, patreon.com/The Great Talk About is my Patreon page. And yeah, just thanks so much for this being my first.
Yeah, and let me say, support Jesse, support One Kind Mind. I've known Jesse now, I don't know how many years?
We're going on 5.
5,
yeah.
and we came together based upon the incredibly beautiful creation of One Kind Mind. And I immediately took interest in this project and in you, and I have only grown in that interest. And I'm not easy to please, but by way of inviting you, check out onekindmind.org.
Yep.
Follow Jesse, support One Kind Mind. I know there's lots of alternatives and many other visions out there in the digital world, but this is unique and it's organic and it's real and it's beautiful. And not just follow, what can you do to participate in its creation? So reach out if you're moved, check it out, and reach out to Jesse and all the people in his life and bring forth this vision. And thank you, and I hope to see you again.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Alan.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed the podcast as much as I enjoyed making it. A conversation with Alan is always a treat, and I'm definitely looking forward to our next one. If you'd like to find out more about Alan, please don't forget to visit his website at worlddharma.com. You can also support him as a creator on Patreon at patreon.com/Alan Clements. And yeah, if you can, please support Alan. I know he gives out a lot more than he's worth, and you won't be disappointed. Getting to know Alan is a delight, to say the least. We are also giving away a free digital copy of Alan's book, A Future to Believe In, for a limited time until September 21st, 2020, which is International Peace Day, to help spread the word about One Kind Mind. Simply go to onekindmind.org, sign up yourself, and when prompted, sign up 3 more of your friends, and we'll send you a free digital copy of Alan's book, A Future to Believe In. A giant thanks to Alan for sharing this offer. And we definitely value your feedback, so please leave your comments below or reach out to us on social media. Maybe give us an idea for the next OKM cast, or maybe some advice on audio, visual. We're working on it, so yeah, we value your feedback. Please reach out. And on that note, I hope wherever you are in this strange global pandemic mix of climate calamity and extinction rebellion and social inequality and all the jazz happening on the planet, I hope this day finds you well and you're doing good despite all the challenges in life. So until next time, be well. Bless.